All right, Nick, let's talk about the Chicago Bears here for just a second. Obviously, the Chicago Bears have the #1 overall pick. A couple mock drafts have been released, and I think there's some really interesting options there for the Chicago Bears. Of course, we're going to weigh in and give our opinion on what we think the best option would be if they were to keep that #1 draft pick and make a selection there. But, before we get into all the draft stuff, there's something that's going to happen right before the draft, and that is the Super Bowl, Nick. There are 4 teams left. You have the Eagles, you have the 49ers, the Bengals, the Chiefs, and Bears fans. We want to know in the comments below, who do you want to win the Super Bowl? Let us know. We're dying to hear who you want to win. But Nick, what do you have for the Bears in this coming draft?
Yeah, so the #1 draft, Nick, mock draft expert of all time, the guy who's been doing it for decades, probably the #1 guy on the subject. Doesn't mean he's always right, but he's definitely the most, I'll say, educated, most connected, most experienced guys. Of course, Mel Kiper over at ESPN. He released his very first mock draft for the 2023 NFL Draft, and he's very interestingly have the Chicago Bears selecting Georgia defensive tackle Jalen Carter, #1 overall. Now, obviously, Bears fans, everyone's like, well, listen, they're just going to trade the pick back and get a bunch of draft picks, and that's what they're going to do. But I think Mel Kiper brought up an interesting point. He was like, listen, I think I see the Bears trying to trade here, but I don't know if they'll be able to get more value out of a trade than they would get for Jalen Carter. And then that's not saying Jalen Carter is just an absolute animal who's a once in a lifetime prospect. I think he has a lot of good tools. I think he's going to be a good player. But the reality is, Mize, we're all banking on the fact that someone's going to be willing to give up, 3 first-round draft picks, 2 first-round draft picks, something egregious for the #1 overall pick. And I can't think of a time in modern history. I think you almost have to go back to the Rams trading up to get Jared Goff way back when to see the last time a team was able to give up so many picks. And everyone knows how the Rams treat draft picks is kind of in a league of their own here with less need. So I think the expectation that someone's just going to come in and offer the Bears a haul for #1 overall, I don't actually know if that will happen. And if you're stuck at #1 and you don't have some guy coming to trade for you, the Chicago Bears could do a lot worse than Jalen Carter. Because let's be honest, the interior of that defense, the ability to make negative plays, to stop the run, to get pressure in the quarterback's face was absolutely abysmal for the Bears last season. Teams were able to move the football over them, frankly. Just the way it was. They couldn't stop anybody thanks to the weaknesses on that front line. Getting a guy like Jalen Carter there would be the immediate remedy to that problem right away. So I think if they can't trade, and I think there's a strong chance they won't be able to just because no one will be able to give them a package that's worth it, Jalen Carter would be the right fit for this Bears team.
Yeah, Nick. And like you said, it is going to be hard for someone to reach. You mentioned the Goff trade. I immediately think back to the RG3 trade. That was a big one that kind of set the team back for a while as well.
Yeah,
But
Washington probably looks back and says, I really wish we didn't do that. You know what I mean? Like,
I bet
who's
they
going to repeat that?
definitely.
Remember when the Bears traded up one spot to get Trubisky? I mean, do you
Yeah.
think do you think anybody's going to want to look at that and be like, yeah, we really want to do that? What the Bears did with Trubisky? I think that's going to be tough. I mean, they may get a guy, but I just think that's going to be tough.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
you think about Washington as well. I mean, they draft Kirk Cousins that same draft. So, they didn't even have to move up. They probably would have been better off sticking with Kirk Cousins, not trading up, going forward with everything. But like you said, it just doesn't seem worth it this day and age. And Jalen Carter, Nick, he seems very good. He's almost like a Quinnen Williams-like player to me, that big of a game changer. You see what Williams has done to the middle of that Jets monster defense. This could be the first piece on that front four for the Bears. Williams a little bit faster than Carter, but Carter is much, much stronger, a big guy. And, he's done it against the best competition. Some of his best games, Nick, are against top-tier SEC schools like Tennessee, LSU, graded out 90 overall plus grades per PFF in those games. And he's progressed every single season. That's something that we like to see in the draft grades. 2020, 71 grade, 2021, an 85 grade, and finally 2022, a 92.3 overall grade for Jalen Carter. This guy seems like a game wrecker. He seems like, a very, very solid, worthy guy of being in, that top 5 level draft pick, a real game wrecker, a game changer, a guy that really can come on your defense and change the entire culture of that defense. So, I think sticking here and getting Carter isn't necessarily the worst move here, Nick.
Well, especially when you look at the fact the and I was just double checking here. The Bears had the 31st ranked run defense last year in the NFL. So obviously it fills a position of need. They immediately get a lot better in an area that was big weakness. But let's take a step back, Miles, right? We're all assuming, probably rightly so at this point, that Justin Fields is the future franchise quarterback for this organization. That means eventually, sooner rather than later, next year, 2, 3, he'll get a pretty big deal, right? He's on his rookie deal now, but eventually he'll get locked up to a long-term deal. If you go at number one overall, and that's saying you get a skill player, or you trade back and you know, if or assuming you can't trade back, or you get, say, a defensive end, right, who gets huge money. Look at what Bosa gets paid. The money that Joey Bosa got paid, for example, Frank, the money Nick Bosa is going to get paid. That's huge. That's going to hurt big time against the cap. But if you get a defensive tackle, the difference in dollars between a long-term deal between a defensive end and a defensive tackle is absolutely massive. Right. That's one of the reasons why they got rid of Robert Quinn, was to clear up cap space. Right. It's one of the reasons Khalil Mack is gone, was to clear up cap space, because those guys, those edge guys, get paid a lot of freaking money. But a guy like Jalen Carter in the middle gets paid a lot less. And if you have to dole out big time money pretty soon for Justin Fields and maybe some pieces you want to surround him with, because I think this offseason they're going to go really hard and heavy to get some veteran skill players around Fields. So they're going to spend a lot of money in that department. It makes sense to, in the draft, go for a cheaper guy. Go for a guy that's not going to break the bank 2-3 years down the road. So I think that's actually why I like Jalen Carter here, and why I agree with Mel Kiper more than Will Anderson. Not that Will Anderson may not be even a little bit of a player, but they both fill a need. They both address a weakness, and Jalen Carter in the long run makes better business sense when it comes to salary cap. And I think that will be huge for the Bears when you look at the long-term trajectory of this franchise.